Welcome to Animania Chronicles, where we dive deep into the captivating worlds of anime, dissecting stories, unraveling characters, and sharing our passion for all things animated. In the previous video, we talked about an action, adventure, life in another world anime. That time, I got reincarnated as a slime. Let's continue on this journey. After Rimuru and company traveled further, Rimuru then set off for the armed nation of Dwan with Gabuta, and his friends were worried about him. Then they arrived at the entrance gate, and Rimuru dreamed of meeting pretty elves. Suddenly, two guys appeared who wanted to cause problems. The reason for this was that the guys thought Rimuru was a weak monster. He asked if Gabuta still knows the rule of not attacking humans, he should then close his eyes and ears. Rimuru intended to teach the two guys a lesson, but they underestimated him. That's when they started insulting Rimuru, and he turned into a direwolf. Rimuru realized he had evolved, and the guys thought it was just an illusion. Rimuru was annoyed, and the adventurers attacked Rimuru with their strongest skills. Rimuru was surprised that they are losers like Team Rocket from Pokemon. He used his menace skill and drove away the adventurers. Afterwards, he learned that he underestimated his powers, and many innocent people were injured in his attack. Following this, guards appeared, and they were surprised to see a slime. Rimuru was arrested with Gabuta, and he apologized for causing trouble. Before Rimuru could clear up the misunderstanding, another guard appeared. He reported to his captain that Garm and his brothers were in trouble and that they were out of healing potions. Then Rimuru interrupted their conversation and said that he can solve their problem. They learned that Rimuru can create healing potions, and Kaido didn't hesitate to save his friends. Rimuru was waiting for Kaido's return, and he was sure that Kaido is a nice guy. In the meantime, he played with threads and wondered how long Gutta plans to sleep. Then Kaido returned with Garm and his brothers. They thanked Rimuru for giving them the healing potions. After that, Kaido also thanked Rimuru, and he learned that Rimuru was looking for a blacksmith. The following day, Rimuru was led by Kaido to a talented blacksmith. On the way, he spotted a shiny sword, and Kaido said that they will meet the guy who forged it. Following this, they arrived at Kijin's weapon shop, and Rimuru learned that he is a passionate weaponsmith. Suddenly, Garm and his brothers appeared, and they had already told Kijin about a slime named Rimuru. Kijin was happy that Rimuru had saved his friends. Shortly afterward, Rimuru explained that he was looking for a craftsman who could build houses. Unfortunately, Kijin was very busy because Minister Vesta asked him to make 20 swords by the end of the week, and he was short of materials. He'd apologized for not being able to help. At that moment, Rimuru remembered that he had stored several tons of magic ore in his body. Rimuru started laughing and spat out a magic ore. Kijin couldn't believe that there was magic ore in Ruru's body. Then he noticed that it wasn't a normal magic ore, but a cluster of magic steel. After this, Rimuru made a deal with Kijin and asked him to find some fellow artisans to teach the villagers their crafts in his village. Kijin was surprised by his simple request, but Garm and his friends said they still don't have time because they have to produce weapons for the king's army. Following this, Rimuru learned from Great Sage that he could replicate weapons. Rimuru asked about a sword that Kijin had forged, then he started eating them to analyze it in his body. Rimuru was able to copy the sword with his Great Sage skill. As a result, he made 20 long swords, and the dwarves were shocked. They were grateful and wanted to celebrate with Rimuru. To introduce them to elves, Rimuru couldn't resist and was looking forward to meeting elves in a nightclub. When he arrived, he was greeted by pretty elves, and the elves thought Rimuru was cute. They wanted to hug Rimuru, and he enjoyed his time with the elves. The boys knew he was having fun and were grateful for this great experience. A few moments later, Kijin told Rimuru that he was impressed by his ability to create perfect copies of his swords in just a few seconds. Rimuru replied that it was only possible because he is such a talented blacksmith. Then Rimuru asked a bartender to pour him some wine, and he was planning to rise her up. While Rimuru was having a good time, Gabuta was still sleeping in a prison cell. Following this, Rimuru was approached by a pretty elf, and he thought she wanted to give him a massage. He was wrong because she meant fortune-telling. Suddenly, Na suggested that Ginger should read which person Rimuru was destined to be with. She started with a joke and said that she couldn't see anything. Then she used her fortune-telling powers, and Rimuru thought that she would see a slime in her crystal ball. But in Ginger's crystal ball, they could see a pretty girl. Kijin noticed Rimuru was blushing, and they teased him a little bit. At that moment, Minister Vesta appeared in the nightclub, planning to cause trouble. He knew that it was impossible to forge 20 long swords on time, and he was shocked when Kijin replied that they had already been delivered. As a result, Minister Vesta started to complain about Ruru and told Kijin that he shouldn't bring a lowly monster into a highbrow establishment. The bartender tried to calm him down, but he poured booze over Ruru. Ruru stayed calm, but Kijin punched Vesta in his face. He was angry at how Vesta treated his new friend Ruru and knew the consequences for his actions. Suddenly, Kijin asked Ruru if he would like to have him as an artisan in his village. Ruru was happy that Kijin wanted to live in his village, but things didn't go as smoothly as expected. However, Kaido and some guards showed up, and they had no choice but to arrest them. When they arrived at the prison, Ruru was surprised that Gobuto was still sleeping. Kijin apologized to his friends, but they weren't mad at him. After that, Ruru learned that they would be put on trial. He also learned about Kijin's past, that Vesta was his adjutant. Vesta didn't like him because he was from a family of peasants. Then Kijin said that Vesta's Magic Soldiers project had failed. He blamed Kijin for the failure of his project, and Kijin took responsibility. As a result, he left the royal guards, and Vesta still held a grudge against him. Suddenly, he said that Vesta is actually not a bad person but just a Jigachad. So Kijin decided to live in Rimuru's village from now on, and his friends planned to accompany him. A few hours later, Gobuto woke up, and Ruru told him that he will pick him up later. The following morning, they were taken to a court. Majesty Gazelle Dwargo then appeared, and Ruru bowed to him. Ruru was surprised to see Majesty Gazelle, and he sensed that Gazelle is a strong warrior. The trial started, and Judge Frank Caprio told them to raise it. It was then explained to the judge what had happened, and Kijin knew that her lawyer had been bribed. Vesta tried to get rid of Kijin, and Ruru was shocked by his lies. Afterwards, the verdict was decided, and Ruru got a bad feeling. As a result, Kijin and his friends were sentenced to 20 years of forced labor in the mines. Suddenly, Majesty Gazelle spoke to his old friend Kijin, and they immediately bowed. He asked him if he had any interest in returning to his ranks, but Kijin refused and told Gazelle that he had found a master. The soldiers wanted to punish him for his rudeness, but Gazelle wasn't angry with him. Gazelle was on Kin's side. Gaz had no intention of punishing Kijin, and he pronounced the verdict that Kijin and his friends will be banished from Dwan. A short time later, Gazelle said he lost a loyal retainer. Fester replied that Kijin is a traitor because he swore his loyalty to a low slime. Suddenly, Gazelle said that he had misunderstood something. He knew that Kijin wasn't involved in the Magic Soldier project at all. He then demanded to hear the truth from Vesta, and he showed him an S-rank healing potion that Rimuru had made. Vesta had never seen such a rare potion and was surprised to learn that Rimuru had made it. At that moment, Vesta realized what he had done wrong. He had always admired Majesty Gazelle and wondered when he had chosen the wrong path. However, he asked for forgiveness and was disappointed in himself. Meanwhile, Kaiva said goodbye to his friend Kijin. He told Rimuru to take good care of his friends and said goodbye to them. Then we see Gazelle, who ordered a warrior to observe Ruru because he sensed tremendous power within him. Some days later, we see Guildmaster Fuse, who asked Cavil how things went in the Great Forest of Jura. Cavil said that the forest was extremely dangerous and that Guildmaster Fuse should at least be happy that they didn't die. After that, Cavil confirmed about Vora's disappearance. Guildmaster Fuse was concerned about this report, and he said that in 3 days the adventurers will investigate around the forest. Cavil and his friends were shocked because they wanted a longer break. When they complained about their new quest, a masked woman appeared behind them. She also planned to go to the Great Forest of Jura and asked if she could accompany them. Arena said sure, and they introduced themselves to each other. As a result, Shizu learned that they will leave in 3 days. Then we see Ruru transformed into a dire wolf, and he planned to teach Ranga a new attack. He created a powerful lightning bolt with his horns that got the power to pulverize a huge rock. Ranga was impressed by his master, and Ruru learned that he needs to be careful when using his attacks in the future. After that, they returned to his village, and he enjoyed the peaceful day. Several weeks have passed since his return from the armed nation of Dworgen. Kaijin showed the goblins how to forge weapons. Meanwhile, the other dwarves also settled in and taught the goblins many new things. As a result, Ruru and the goblins were well on their way to building a new village. Then Ruru remembered when they first came back from Dworgen. That day, Rigger told him that other goblins came here from nearby goblin villages to seek protection. Ruru welcomed them to his village, and he needed to recharge his mana. 3 days later, he walked around his village and discovered Gobuta, who was teaching the newbies how to summon a dire wolf. Ruru was surprised that Gobuta had made it. That's when we learned that Gobuta was forgotten in the prison cell. Gobuta learned to summon a dire wolf and was able to break out of the prison cell. But despite his talent, Gobuta wasn't the greatest teacher. Meanwhile, Rickard appeared, and he was now a goblin king. He told Ruru that his son had discovered a suspicious group in the forest. According to the report, it was a group of humans. Then we see Kava and his friends running from a group of monsters in the forest. They thought they were going to die, but Shizu suddenly stopped. She planned to defeat the monsters and pulled out her magic sword. Then she launched her attack and cast a fireball spell. Some monsters survived, and Shizu rushed at the monsters to defeat them. She won the battle, and the adventurers were impressed by her. When she thought the fight was over, a monster woke up. Shizu was able to react in time, but she collapsed for an unknown reason at the last moment. Ruru appeared, and he was able to save her. They heard a voice, and they were surprised that a slime appeared in front of them. Rimuru gave Shizu her mask back, and he remembered that she is the one he is destined to be with. Later, Lit said that he had brought the adventurers lunch, and Ruru was proud of him for helping people in need. However, he entered the hut, and Great Sage told him that he had met the 3 adventurers in the cave before. Afterwards, Lit told them that Ruru is their master, and they were surprised. Then he made a joke, but he noticed that only Shizu was laughing. Then they introduced themselves to Ruru, and he noticed that Shizu behaved like a typical Japanese woman. Ruru also learned that they had no evil intentions and that their guild master gave them the quest to investigate the surroundings of the great forest of Jura. In the evening, he went to see Shizu. To talk to her, she asked him some questions and was wondering if he was from Japan too. Ruru replied that in his old life he was Japanese, and she was glad to have met him. Ruru told her how he was reincarnated to this world, and she replied that she was summoned to this world. Following this, he learned that she lived in Japan at a time when there was still a war. Ruru activated a skill to show Shizu what happened to Japan after the war. Then she saw what happened to Japan after the war ended. She was happy that there was peace in Japan and wished her mother could see it. Ruru told her about his goal to create a peaceful place in this world too. Suddenly, Shizu collapsed, and he was worried about her, but Shizu said everything was fine. A short time later, Kijin appeared, and he wanted to discuss something important. Meanwhile, Shizu remembered how her mother died due to the war in Japan, but she survived because she was summoned to another world. The guy who summoned her called her a failure, and she begged for help. Before he left, he realized that she had an affinity for fire, and he offered to infuse her body with a demon. After that, Shizu felt that something was wrong with her body. Also, a feather fell to the ground, and a monster invaded Lan's castle. The monster was sent by the Great Sorcerer King, and he intended to kill Lan to become the next demon lord. Lan wasn't scared, and he ordered Ifrit to eliminate the enemy. Shizu couldn't disobey Lan's orders, and she was attacked by the enemy. At that moment, Ifrit countered with his flames, and Shizu defeated the enemy with a powerful flame spell. Lan was impressed and planned to use Shizu as a guard in his castle. A few years passed, and Shizu was in the forest. Pino had found a little fox, and she asked Shizu to keep it a secret. After that, she got the idea to give him a name, and they decided to call him Pitsu. At that moment, the monster started to evolve, and they were surprised about it. On the way home, Shizu warned that she wasn't allowed to bring Pitsu into the castle, but Pino was sure that Lan would allow her to keep him. She was wrong, and Shizu started to act weird because of fire spirit Ifrit. Ifrit decided to classify the two as enemies and wipe them out with a powerful spell. When she regained control of her body, she realized that she was a monster. That's all for today. Stay tuned for the last part. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the vast realms of anime. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and stay tuned for more thrilling reviews and discussions. Until next time, keep exploring the boundless wonders of anime with us.